Hey there, I'm Alex, and welcome to my ComfyUI for VFX series. Before we get started, I wanted to go through a few things, set expectations, and more or less lay out a roadmap. The idea behind this series is to understand what ComfyUI is, what you can do with it, more importantly, lay out a series of workflows so that you get an idea of what you can achieve with this software. This is by no means a masterclass. It's more or less me just sharing what I know and how I've learned it and how I leverage it. And as you can imagine, it's going to be, well, quite long. I don't have a specific number of episodes in mind, but it is pretty lengthy. There is just too much to cover. If you're a Nuke or Houdini artist, that should give you an idea of the scope. This is not a software that you can just learn in a couple hours or a few hours. This will take probably hundreds of hours over your career. I've personally been using it for a little over a year now, and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. Like there's just too much to learn out there. So that should set expectations as to where we're going on this journey, which let's call it that. My intention is to keep these videos fairly short. I'm hoping somewhere around the 30-minute mark, just so it's not too overwhelming and so that I can slice it up in digestible chunks. The idea behind this course is to have more people in the industry engage in these conversations and be exposed to an awesome software that I think is ComfyUI. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. If anything, it's only ramping up. And the interesting thing about ComfyUI is that comparing it to any other VFX tool, you usually wait a year for updates, right? So for major updates. Whereas with ComfyUI, it's like you always have to be on top because every week, sometimes every day, there's a new tool out there. So maybe not all of them you need to learn, but if you want to keep your eye on what's going on, then that's something that you need to acknowledge as your new reality if it's something you want to embark and take serious. All right, with that said, let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is hardware requirements. If you look at the list of requirements here, it's actually not too bad. Like the barrier to entry is actually quite low. The thing is, while you don't need a lot to get Comfy up and running, you might need more and more depending on what you want to achieve. So if you just want to do very basic image generation, you can get around with very little. But as you start introducing more powerful and newer models, if you start doing video, then that's where things like this hardware requirement's no longer valid. And you'll see there are certain points where 8 gigs of VRAM is not enough, and then maybe 12 is not enough, maybe 16 is not enough, and that's where maybe cloud comes in, right? If it's something that you don't have a strong enough machine, this should hopefully get you started. But if there's something that's fairly powerful that you want to do or you want to achieve, the cloud option is there. So I will cover it in time. I wanted to lay out a few online resources, and like always, I'll put links to everything in the description below. The first one I want to show you is the comfy.org official website. So this is the project's official website. If you haven't checked it out, definitely do that. There's the Discord server if you want to join it. Very helpful, very nice people over there. Then there is the official documentation website, as well as the ComfyUI wiki. And between those two, there's just a great wealth of information. Then we have the official comfy.org repo. So we'll get into this in a minute. And then finally, I did want to show you Run Comfy. This is just in case you don't have a machine powerful enough. Run Comfy is widely used and widely known. It's a really good option for using ComfyUI in the cloud, and it's actually rather cheap. I do have an affiliate link for this below, so if it's something you're considering to use, I'd really appreciate it if you use that link to sign up. Let's talk about installation options. The most notable ones are the original repo, so the ComfyUI, the core UI repo here, the desktop app, which at this point is a few months old. There's Pinokio, right? So if you go to Pinokio like we used in the past, and you can just install it from there. And finally, like I said before, the runcomfy.com to run it in the cloud. And there's other providers for the cloud, of course. That's just the one I've used quite a bit in the past. So you can pick your flavor. Whatever you feel like installing, it'll probably work just fine. I have heard that the ComfyUI desktop app is maybe a bit on the unstable side. It's only a few months old and hasn't been really, tried and tested as much as the portable version, which is, I think, the more popular one. So I do have the desktop version installed, and let me just show you. So if you were to launch it, it launches like a Windows app, right? So it's just a standalone, right? So that's what it is. Whereas the portable version is just a folder that you deploy, which I'll be doing shortly, and then you just launch that through a command line, right? Then from the Pinokio is just, you install it and it becomes a module within Pinokio and you can just run it from there. And the neat thing about the cloud one is that you don't really need to install anything. It's you log in and then you spin up a machine. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through now the installation of the portable one. So I'm going to go ahead and click here on the core UI ComfyUI repo, right? And from here, what you want to go ahead and do is you want to go to the releases. So here on the right, what you'll see is that ComfyUI has a bunch of updates constantly. Like you'll see throughout the series, we'll always be updating, just because the moment new modules get added, then there's updates that happen on to the software in the background. So we want to download here the Windows portable, the NVIDIA version, so 1.4 gigs or 1.5 gigs, and we'll give it a second to download. So the download's now complete, and if we look at our file browser here, what we've got is essentially a zipped file. So you want to go ahead and extract the contents of that file, and then just drop it into whatever folder you want to consider your ComfyUI installation, right? So we want to do that. And once that's completed, you can go ahead and delete the original zip file. And what's inside is essentially how we're going to be navigating Comfy from now on, if you're using the portable version, which, as you can see, is what I'm using. The installation for the standalone is just slightly different. So if you go here to the desktop app, follow that link, and then go to releases, the latest release, and you want to download the Windows or Mac version that they have available here. And you'll see what that'll download is essentially an executable that you run, and just like any other installer in Windows, it'll just do its thing in the background. For me, it'll probably just say that I already have it installed, but that's just follow the instructions, and that's how you install it. Then the installation for Pinokio is just want to go to the Discover tab here at the top. And then once you're there, you want to look for ComfyUI, and you follow the instructions here and you just download, and it'll take care of everything for you in the background. And the last option I want to show you is running it on the cloud, specifically on runcomfy.com. And I've used it quite a bit in the past, which is why I feel comfortable enough recommending it to you. Just remember, there I have an affiliate link, so if you want to support me, you can do that through the link below. If you want to sign up and buy some credits, do it through there, and then I get supported directly through that. So the reason I use Run Comfy sometimes is because when my machine is not powerful enough, so let's say when 24 gigs of VRAM isn't enough for something I'm trying to achieve, I can just come to Run Comfy. I can just rent one of their machines for an hour or two, however much time I need, and then I just pay for that. So the way this works is if you go here to pricing, you see you don't really need to buy a subscription. You can actually get started for free. There's even a free trial, and then there's machines that go up to 8 gigs of VRAM, which is quite nice for some workflows. And then yeah, that's kind of it. So if you do want to get started, let me just show you how you would do that. You would go here to the launch app at the top, right? And the nice thing about this is that not only don't you have to worry about installation, stuff like that, but you would just you can even select the starting point. So even though we said launch app, it's asking us now, like, what do we want to do? Do we want to start with a preset workflow, or do we want to start with a clean version of Comfy? So just an example, there's a trellis, which I covered a few videos ago about Image to 3D. So let's say we want to launch that workflow. All you need to do is click the Run Workflow button here, and that'll prompt you for pricing now. So if you look at the options here, what it's charging you for is depending on the type of machine you're getting. So you see 16 gigs of VRAM, 24, and the higher you go, the more expensive it gets, of course. So because I am a hobbyist and not a pro user, not paying the monthly membership, I just buy credits as I need them. Let's say I want to launch the medium machine here, so I just want to click the launch button here, and that'll give me now this pop-up asking me how long I want to use this for, if I want to make sure that it turns off after a certain amount of time. And let's say, yes, I'm happy with that. So all I need to do now is click launch, and that'll essentially put us in a queue. It'll take a few minutes, and then it'll eventually just launch. Okay, so now going back to how I'm going to be doing the majority of this series, I'm going to go back to my Windows portable installation. And keep in mind, this is the one I just downloaded with you guys. I am using a vanilla version of ComfyUI, so that I'll hopefully encounter the same limitations and lack of models that you do as we go through these series. So you want to open that folder, and the one thing you want to do is you want to do the run the NVIDIA GPU.bat. Unless you're running this on a CPU, I'd look into the limitations, but it'll be a much worse experience if that's what you're doing. You probably want to use a GPU for this. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that, and you'll see what pops up is a command line. And maybe the first time it runs, it'll just do a bunch of installing dependencies, installing requirements for the project. So the first time you launch it will take a little bit of time. So when that's done, what will happen is that your browser will open a new tab, and in that tab, what you'll be greeted with is ComfyUI and the default workflow. So the default text-to-image workflow. And that's kind of it. Now we're in it. We now have ComfyUI up and running, and we know the installation was successful. So before we do anything here, there is one thing I want to install, and that's the ComfyUI manager. And if you don't know what this is, I'm going to say the majority of people have this installed. It just makes your life easier when it comes to installing custom nodes, some models. So it's just a very nice thing to do. Not only that, it helps you. It also gives you option to download updates to your custom nodes. Gives you updates to ComfyUI. So it's just an overall. It's like a hub to do a lot of things when it comes to ComfyUI. So definitely my #1 installation is going to be that. So again, I'll post the link to this in the description below. So now we're down here, and I know that we are installing for the portable version of ComfyUI. So keep in mind, you will need to install Git like the instructions say here. So if you don't have Git installed yet, definitely go ahead and follow those instructions. So you download the Windows versions and select the standalone version. And then from there, just install it and you should be up and running. Once you've done that, what you want to go ahead and do is you want to right click this .bat file and you want to say save link as. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and save it inside of my ComfyUI Windows Portable folder. I believe that's what the instructions say. Let's double check here. Yes, so that's what it says here. So let's do just that. I'm going to go ahead and say save. And because this is a bat file, your browser might not like it and might not want to download it. So just make sure that if that happens, you say, yes, I want to keep it. And yes, I am sure I want to keep it. So now that we've done that, if we go back to our Windows Explorer here, what you'll see is we have that bat file now here. And all we need to do now is double click it, and it'll take care of everything in the background to install that extension, let's call it, to ComfyUI. So, okay, it looks like it's been successful. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and close the window where I launched ComfyUI before, and just make sure that now as I relaunch it, it'll take that manager into account, the ComfyUI manager. So if we go now to our ComfyUI tab, what you'll see here at the top right is that now it says reconnecting because I've closed the command line. The command line is kind of like the heart behind it. If you close the command line, there's essentially no ComfyUI running anymore, which is why this is saying reconnecting. So because I don't really care about that, I'm going to go ahead and close that tab, and I am going to go back into my Comfy portable folder again. And because I've already installed the manager, I can get rid of this bat file. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And now I'm going to go ahead and click again the run NVIDIA GPU.bat. So give it a second. And the nice thing about this now is that because ComfyUI has very little things installed, it'll just take a few seconds to launch. And it's actually taking longer this time because, as you can see, it's installing all of the dependencies for the ComfyUI manager there at the top. So it's saying it's installing dependencies. So this time it's going to take longer than any future versions because you have to take that installation time into consideration. So, okay, we're here again. I'm going to go ahead and close my downloads tab. And now we are in ComfyUI, and you see now we have something a bit different here at the top. Now we have the manager, right? So this is what's so good about it. And the first thing I want to go ahead and do now that we have this up and running is click that manager button. And you'll see we have now this window here, and I want to make sure that I have the latest ComfyUI and the latest custom nodes. In this case, ComfyUI Manager is the only custom thing I've installed, but I want to make sure I have latest everything. So I'm going to go ahead and say update ComfyUI, and it looks like we might be up to date. And then the next thing is I want to say update all. So this is going to look into the manager as well and make sure that we have the latest version for it. So it says now that everything is up to date and that we can go ahead and restart. So I am going to say restart, and yes, I want to reboot the server. So again, if we look here now into the command line again, it is doing the reboot. And if we look here at the top right, it says reconnecting because our server went down, right? So this time it's going to go ahead and do the update itself for any updates it found, and then it's just going to go ahead and launch the server. So now that message of it not being available has gone. So now we can go ahead and close this. So now that message has gone and we are ready to get started. So now that we're up and running again, there's a couple extra things I want to change. And this is just, of course, all personal preference. You don't have to make these changes. I'm going to go ahead and open the manager again. And I want to go ahead and disable the skip update check. I do want it to check for updates periodically. And the other thing I want to go ahead and change is the preview method. I'm going to set it to auto. And this is maybe not relevant right now, but you'll see it in the future why this is something I like. So I'm going to go ahead now and close this. The other change I want to go ahead and do is if we go down here, down to the right at on settings, if we go to the light graph, right? And I want to change the splines or the spaghetti, if you might have heard it mentioned before, into straight or linear, whatever your preference is. So I want to go to linear here, and you see that changes in the background how my connections happen. So just like, and this again, this doesn't change anything. This is just a preference thing. So the default is spline, which makes everything look a bit like sometimes the connections are a bit hard to follow for me, just because I'm so used to the way Nuke works. However, if you ever use Shake in the past, it feels very much like that. So again, I'm going to go back into the settings, light graph, and I'm going to make mine linear. You could also make it straight so that it looks more like a circuit board. The issue with straight is that it's really hard to make these lines sometimes move the way you want them to move. So again, I'll just keep it to straight. So light graph and linear. So, okay, I'm going to set that to linear, and that's kind of it. So now, and anywhere I move my nodes, my connections are nice and straight in a line. So a bit of navigation. There's not a lot you need to know right now, but the main things you want to do is you want to be able to move around your canvas here. So I'm using the middle click, the mouse, right? So the middle button is essentially like holding that canvas and moving it around. You could also hold the space bar and left click, and that'll also give you control over this. Just be careful sometimes when you middle click over connections, it can break them and you might not notice until later. So just be mindful of that. Always try to pan around while not doing it over nodes. In my experience, I've run into issues in the past. So one thing to keep in mind. If you want to zoom in and out, use your mouse wheel. You can also use the controls here on the right to zoom in and out and to center into your workflow. So if I have my workflow maybe like that, I can just click that button and it'll just center it. So it's called the fit view. And then here on the left, the navigation, you have your saved workflows, you have your model library, you have your node library, and you also have your queue. So when you're queuing more than one job at a time, you can see what's coming up, and you can delete or promote some or another. And then you can just browse through a few of these navigation at the top here. And then it has sort of a tab system, and this is fairly new within the last few months, whereas before you had to do multiple tabs of the browser. So I can just copy the address here and open myself a new tab, right? And what that'll do is almost like launch a second instance of Comfy. So let's say on this instance I deleted a node, but I can always go back to that other tab and have a different workflow happening. So just keep in mind that you can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this because I don't need a second tab, but I do want to show you about the tabs here at the top. So if you see, we have the untitled workflow. If I click the plus button here, what you see is that now we have another canvas to play with, and we can jump between those two. So just like I was doing with the tabs in the browser, you can do it with the tabs internally as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close that because I only need the one. And then finally, we have our manager here at the top. as well as our Q button and the batch count, and just a few nice new things, such as the toggle for the bottom panel, which I actually like a lot, which is sort of like it's like having the command line present. So everything you do, everything you batch, everything you try to render, it'll happen in the command line. So you'll have some lines going in the nodes, but if you really want to know what's going on in the in the background, what I used to do before this was a feature, what I used to do is I put my command line somewhere in a corner, and I still might do that just because, old habits die hard, but I put it in a corner, and then I'd make sure that that window is on top of everything, so that as I work, I can still see the command line and see what's going on. But the neat thing is that now that that's added here, you can just turn on that bottom panel and make it as thin as you need, and at least you can, while you're working, see what's going on in the background and make sure that everything's working as expected, that that's not hung or any of that stuff. And that's kind of it for navigation. So now that we have our baseline of what this looks like and what we're ready to work with is, the other thing that, again, is optional, just like the manager, but I recommend it, is have some sort of a resource monitor. So I'm going to go ahead into the manager now that we have it installed, and this time I'm going to go into custom nodes manager. So what you'll see here is that if I select here from the dropdown, if I select installed, the only thing I have installed is the ComfyUI manager, but I want to set it to all. And this time I want to look for the CRYS, so Chris Tools is what I want to install. And then the nice thing about this is that it has a very nice resource manager. So that way, if you're running a workflow and you feel at any point that you're stuck or that's not working as you expect, it might be that your hardware is not powerful enough, or that you're running out of memory, and maybe it gets to a point where the workflow gets stuck, but it doesn't even give you an error. It's just because it's just completely stuck. So having a visual way of looking at your resources and making sure that there's enough for everything you're trying to do, I find particularly useful. So this is another instant install for me. So I'm going to go ahead and click the install button here, right? And what you'll see is that it'll load, it'll ask us what version we want to install it. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want the latest version. So I'm going to go ahead and select and click the select button. And you see now we have our installation happening in the background. It's very small, so it just only takes a second, and it says restart required. And if we look now here at the bottom, we have a nifty little restart button inside, because of it's just part of the Comfy Manager again, which is why it's so nice to do this instead of having to navigate to a GitHub and installing all of this stuff by hand. You can just do it from the manager, and your life is that much better. So I'm going to go ahead and click the install button, and that'll ask me if I want to reboot my server. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to bring to the foreground our command line. And again, like I said before, as you can see, this is where everything's happening. So it's telling us exactly what it's doing, and then once it's done, it'll reconnect. And you see here at the top it says reconnected. So now we should be up and running. But because I know this installation not only requires a restart of the system, but we should also refresh this tab. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. And now you see here at the top, we have resource monitor, right? That tells us how much of our CPU, how much of our RAM, how much of our GPU, and how much of our VRAM is being used. And that's what I find so nice about this. Now that we're up and running, I want to show you how to generate your first image, and that's where I'll leave it for today. So we have, like I said, our default text-to-image workflow, and by default it always comes with this prompt, so I'm going to leave it just for today. And we can queue our image in a few different ways. So we have our queue button here at the top right, or the hotkey, which you'll be using quite a bit, is Control-Enter. So if I hit Control-Enter, what'll happen is that it'll start going from left to right, and until it arrives into the save image node. I don't think I showed you how, but you can just select your nodes with the left mouse button, and if you want to select more, if you want to just drag over and select various nodes, you can just Control and then left click while holding Control, and that will give you this selection mode, right? So that way you can select more than one. One thing is that if you want to move things in a group like I just did, you want to select them in a group. But if I go ahead and try to move this group, right, it does that. You can also hold shift and do it that way. Alternatively, you can duplicate. You can also duplicate nodes by holding Alt and then clicking and dragging, right? So that'll make copies of your nodes. If you want to save the Control C, Control V, which also works. So here I'm doing Control C, Control V. So that works as well. So, just a few things, and I'll give you more as we go and I start moving things around and doing different things. So again, okay, we want to do our first image. So I'm going to, instead of hitting the Q button here, I'm just going to go with Control Enter. So I'm going to do that. And you'll see immediately we are met with our first error, right? The neat thing about this is that you can Google these errors and you can find very quickly solutions for most, because a lot of people have already encountered them. Sometimes, depending on what the error is, it'll give you a link to a GitHub, see if anyone else has had the same issue, if it's a custom node. The other neat thing is that you should and you can also use things like ChatGPT or Claude to troubleshoot or to ask it questions about ComfyUI, and they are usually pretty good at helping you out, especially when you're getting started. So what's happening here is that it's telling us that the load checkpoint node is not able to find the model that we're asking for here. And the nice thing about the errors in ComfyUI is that it'll highlight the nodes where the error is happening. So if it were just an error that's happening, let's say in my background Nuke, right? If you send something to a farm and it's failing, it's like you just have to go through the log and see what's going on, see if you can spot where the issue is happening. Whereas here it's quite visual. It's telling you this node in specifically is having a problem. It's not able to find that model. So specifically for this error, the reason why that's happening is because, well, we don't have any models installed, so it's looking for something that it just can't find. In order for us to install our first model, we want to go to a website like Civit AI. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new tab here, and I'm going to say, I'm going to show you here the address here at the top. It's CIVI, Civit AI, so that way you can find it yourself. And once we're here, what you'll see, this is a place where you can download models, LoRa, so there's workflows. There's just a lot of nice things to download here. So this is definitely a good place to start. But one thing to keep in mind is that there is a lot of not safe for work content on this website. So what I usually do just to filter things out is there is a little eye icon here at the top, and you can filter so that it only gives you content that you're happy with seeing. So I'm gonna just keep it to PG-13 and rated R, and that way anything that isn't within those filters will be blurred out. So now that we're here, we want to download our first model. So I'm gonna go ahead and go up here to the search box, and I'm gonna type Juggernaut, and this is a pretty standard one. It's not a vanilla version of any of the Stable Diffusion models, but it's a very popular one. So I want the Juggernaut XL specifically, because I want to start with Stable Diffusion XL. So I'm going to click that. And then from here, what you want to do is you want to find the download button here. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to click that, and that'll start my download. So as you can see here, my download, it's going to be about 6.6 gigs. So it's going to take about a minute or so. And then from there, I'll show you how to install this model. Okay, so my download is now complete. And if I go into my folder here, what you'll see is we have that Juggernaut XL model downloaded. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut the model, right? And I'm going to go into my Windows, Windows portable version of ComfyUI, and then inside the ComfyUI folder. And from here, I'm going to look for the models folder. And here, I'm going to look for checkpoints. So inside the checkpoints, just so that I keep myself organized, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this SDXL. Because the thing is that these models come in different flavors and not everything's compatible with everything. So it's just nice. It's just a good idea to stay as organized as you can when you start downloading things from online, so that you know, oh, okay, so this only plays well with SDXL. Then you know it shouldn't cross streams with anything that isn't SDXL, like LoRa's and stuff like that. So If you look here at the model description on the website, it says SDXL 1.0, right? So that it's telling you from what base model this was trained. So it is important that you get this information, and that's what's going to decide what your folder is going to be named and where you're going to be saving that. So I'm going to open that folder and I'm going to paste the model in there. So now that we have our model in there, I'm going to go back into my ComfyUI tab, and I'm going to click Control R, right? So that we can refresh, we can reload our tab here. And now if we look at our checkpoint, right, at a low checkpoint node, if I click here, it now shows us that not the one that it was asking for by default, the way the workflow comes, but it shows us our first model. So you see the SDXL folder we created and the Juggernaut model that we've just downloaded. So I'm gonna go ahead and click that and select that model. And now that we have a model in the load checkpoint, and we have our positive and negative prompts, we have our seed, we've selected that we want an image that's 512 by 512. I'm going to go ahead and click and hit again the hotkey Control Enter, so that we start cooking our image. And you see our load checkpoint model goes green, so that means it's doing work in the background. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and open my command line here at the bottom, and this way you can see what I mean by having this open and being able to see what's going on in the background. So the first time you run a model, it needs to load it into memory. So loading a model into memory takes a bit of time. So the first time you generate that image is going to take substantially longer than any future generations you do, because the time of loading the model only happens once. Unless you hop in and do something else where you load something else and then you need to reload it. But if you don't, then that'll give you an idea. So if I go down here at my console again, right, what you'll see is that the prompt was executed in 22.81 seconds. And again, that's including the model load time. And you see now in our workflow, we have our image. Our image has been generated, right? So I'm going to go ahead and make that a bit larger here. You can just grab it from the corner and pull like you do any other software. So that's our generated image of the default prompt, which is beautiful scenery, nature, glass, bottle, landscape, purple galaxy, bottle. So now that we have that, again, I'm going to show you how any future generations are much faster. If I go ahead and click Control Enter now, what you'll see is that now it goes much faster. And if we look at our command line here at the bottom, it says the prompt was executed in 2 seconds. So you see a big change, and that's because the majority of this time was taken loading the model for the first time. But now that it's done, our generations are very quick. So we have, again, a new generation, and the reason why it's different is because we have essentially the seeds here. So if I were to change this from randomized to fixed, and I hit Control Enter, it'll generate that new image for us. But anytime I try to generate a new one, I'm hitting Control Enter, and you see the command lines trying to do its thing in the background. If I show you here, it's taking 0 seconds because it's saying nothing has changed in this workflow. So if I try to hit Control Enter, there's no changes. So there's no need to generate a new image. However, if I change it again to randomize, hit Control Enter, it'll do the prompt again with a random seed, and it'll generate a brand new image this time. That's kind of the extent of it for generating this first image. Do notice that if you didn't turn on the option here inside the manager, so the option to get the preview method, which I set to auto, if you had it onto none, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And if I go ahead and generate a new image, what you'll see is that this time we don't get any preview here in the case sampler. So the reason why I find that useful, I'm going to go ahead and switch it back onto auto. I'm going to go to close and generate a new image, is because this is a very light and fast workflow. So it only takes a couple seconds to generate an image. But getting a preview of where a generation is going when you have a much more complex workflow, I find particularly useful, because you might want to pump the brakes. So, there might be a workflow where it takes, several minutes to generate something. and being able to see a preview of what's happening, I find particularly nice. So if it's straying in a direction that I don't like, I can just cancel the generation, and that'll be it, right? So I can just tweak my settings and then try again. So now that our image is done, the next thing is finding out where you find your generations. So I'm going to go back into the ComfyUI, the portable folder for ComfyUI. And inside that, I want to go to ComfyUI folder. And then I want to look for a folder named outputs. There it is, outputs. And then from there, you'll see a list of all of the images we've generated. So if I can go ahead and open it here, and I can just tap through, and you see these are the generations we just created. So that's where things get saved. So you can either save it, delete it, however you like, and that'll be it. So that's going to do it for this first episode. Thank you for sticking around. If you did, do let me know if you found this helpful. I know this first episode is a bit weird, not terribly exciting, but I did want to make sure that people were up and running, found their flavor of installation that they like, and make sure that we are all in a baseline installation, that moving forward we can just evolve from here. Keep in mind that moving forward, I'm not going to be touching this ComfyUI installation until the next episode, so you can know that wherever I left it off is where I'm starting on the next episode. So I'm not going to be installing anything weird or making changes in the background, so that if I run into issues, I want you guys to see it and hopefully troubleshoot it with you guys. And yeah, let me know in the comments if this was helpful, if there's anything that you want me to cover moving forward. I have a long list, but I can always add to it. And yeah, this is a lot of fun to do, a lot of work, but a lot of fun. So hopefully you enjoy it. So until next time, stay curious. Cheers.